For many of us, Britain's great historic gardens are museums that have little in common with modern garden design. But the truth is that these gardens can have huge contemporary relevance. In this series, I'm exploring 4 of my favourite gardens to show just how much we can learn from them. These are the gardens that have inspired me and which affect the way I garden at home. They're a perfect example of the evolution of garden design, but in many ways, every bit as relevant today as they were in the centuries when they were first made. And few are as influential as the great gardens of the 18th century landscape movement. For me, one garden epitomises the epic designs of this age. So join me as I reveal the secrets of Stowe, my favourite landscape garden. But Kent's buildings weren't just placed for aesthetic reasons. With politicians, aristocracy and artists in the grounds, they were a refuge for discussing wars and rebellions, as well as a place for social gatherings. Did they have fun here as well as just being political?
Absolutely. I mean, here at the Temple of Friendship, this was where Cobham's political cronies met, and we know that there was a wine cellar and probably a kitchen too. So they were in here drinking and eating and probably wenching too.
Oh, so they weren't averse to a bit of hanky-panky?
Absolutely not, no. Not even the vicar of Stowe, who famously chased a maiden to a secluded garden building where the maid was made no more.
In relative terms, these buildings must have cost an absolute fortune.
Yes, but they had enormous amounts of money, and they thought it was worth spending it on this show of wealth and power.
Was it something that the lower classes thought was a complete waste of time? What was their attitude to all this extravagance?
It's hard to know, but every now and again they were invited into the gardens, particularly here at Stowe, and there were huge parties where there were thousands of people in the gardens, and they were treated to free food, and they got to see the fireworks and listen to the music and have a jolly good time and go home after midnight. But there was also a degree of making sure all the locals voted for you, those that were eligible to vote as well, so there was a bit of power as well.
At Stowe, as the century progressed, the concept of an idealised landscape evolved beyond the designs of Bridgeman and Kent. The designers wanted parts of the garden to look even more rustic. The existing buildings here looked out of place, so they invented a way to blend them into their surroundings. At Stowe, the best example of this is the grotto. It was originally built in 1730 as an elaborate Italianate banqueting house. But 50 years later, as its surroundings were being deliberately overgrown, it was partially buried and covered with rough stone. It had been instantly aged into a dark and cosy nook. You know, Kate, everybody worries about that shady corner down the bottom of the garden where nothing will grow. The answer is a grotto.
Yep, every garden should have one.
It's decorated with these enormous rustic chunks of tufa limestone rock. You know, this limestone deposit which creates this light rock, which we now plant alpines in, hollow them out. But here the whole thing's covered in it.
It's to make it look much more cave-like. The building started off a bit more classical, and you can just see little bits of that kind of grinning through. But the idea is it's dark and it's cave-like, and all the planting here would have been very dark and shady. So it's quite a private place as well as a public place when they had the big parties.
So they changed the look of it over the years, and it started with these little tiny pebbles, as we can see on the floor, and then it suddenly got much more chunky, much more rugged and wild.
Yeah, exactly.
So what was it for?
Well, they used it a lot for parties. They had lights in all the trees, and lights on the lake and musicians stationed on boats on the lake. And then the best place for the best guests was in here, where they'd all be eating syllabub.
Oh, very nice. Would you care to join me for a syllabub?
I would, absolutely.
Come and get Blotto in the grotto.